All day long, you didn't think about it. And then you dreamed about it all night. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't the subconscious being cruel at an inconvenient moment. It was the nervous system doing, with almost irritating precision, exactly what it was designed to do. You know this experience. Days or weeks spent trying not to think about a difficult situation, a conversation that needs to happen, a decision you don't want to face, a fear you prefer to keep outside your field of attention during the hours when you can manage where your mind goes. And then, in sleep, it appears, with details that no daytime thought produced, with a presence that is, at the same time, obvious and disturbing. As if the system had patiently waited for the 1 hour when there was no longer any way to control what entered the scene. The most common interpretation is that this reveals something wrong, that the mind can't let go, that it's weakness or obsession or an inability to process. What research on sleep and thought suppression reveals is that the interpretation is completely backwards. The dream didn't appear despite your daytime discipline, it appeared because of it. Daniel Wegner, whose work on how trying not to think about something produces the opposite effect was explored in earlier videos on this channel, conducted an experiment in 2004 that took this discovery into territory none of his previous studies had reached. Wegner and his team asked participants in the minutes before going to sleep to think about a specific person, someone they had in mind as a target of interest or concern, and to do so in one of two ways. One group was instructed to think freely about this person. The other group was instructed to suppress thoughts about them, to actively try not to think about them before falling asleep. What happened during sleep was measured through dream reports collected immediately after waking. The group that had suppressed thoughts about the person before sleep dreamed about them more frequently than the group that had thought about them freely. Deliberate suppression before sleep did not reduce the likelihood of the content appearing in dreams. It increased it. Wegner called this phenomenon the dream rebound effect. Content that had been actively kept out of conscious awareness during wakefulness returned, amplified, during sleep. And the mechanism that explains why this happens begins with what thought suppression requires from the system. To suppress a thought, to actively keep something outside the attentional field, the system paradoxically has to continuously monitor for the presence of that thought. It's the only way to know whether or not it is appearing. This ironic monitoring keeps the suppressed content in a state of greater accessibility than it would be in if there were simply no instructions about it. During the day, this state of greater accessibility is partially offset by the active effort of suppression. At night, when the conscious system stops exercising control, when the capacity for deliberate suppression dissolves with sleep, the content that had been more accessible finds the space that had been denied to it, and it finds that space in a system that has a very specific relationship with emotionally charged and still unprocessed content. A system that doesn't merely allow this content to appear, but actively seeks it out, for reasons that have everything to do with the function sleep was built to fulfill. Antti Revonsuo is a researcher at the University of Turku in Finland and proposed a theory about the function of dreams that took decades to begin receiving the attention it deserved. He called it the threat simulation theory. The central argument is this: the primary biological function of dreams, what explains why the system evolved to produce vivid experiences during sleep, is the simulation of threatening events. During sleep, the nervous system rehearses. It reconstructs situations that represent challenges, dangers, or threats to the organism's physical or social integrity, and practices within this simulated environment the responses that would be necessary in real situations, not as a literal representation of what happened or what will happen. As processing, a way of working through emotionally significant content under conditions of relative safety, where the rehearsal carries no real cost but can produce real learning. What this theory reveals about the video we are exploring is direct. If the primary function of dreams is to simulate and process threatening content, then the content that was deliberately avoided during wakefulness, the content that the conscious system kept outside the attentional field because it was too difficult, too heavy, or simply because there was no space to deal with it, is precisely the kind of content the sleep system will prioritize, not as punishment, by design. The sleep system is asking every night what still needs to be processed. And the content that was actively avoided during the day enters sleep with two characteristics that make it a priority. First, it is in a state of greater accessibility because of the ironic monitoring generated by the effort to suppress it. Second, it is explicitly unprocessed because avoidance is the opposite of processing. Revonso documented that dreams containing threatening content are not accidents or noise in the system, they are the system functioning. And what feeds this system, to a large extent, is precisely what did not receive enough processing while the person was awake. The psychiatrist and dream theorist Ernest Hartman from Tufts University reached the same conclusion through a different path. Hartman spent decades studying dream content in relation to emotionally significant events in the lives of dreamers. What he documented is that dreams function as a context for connection, a space in which the nervous system connects new, emotionally significant experiences with existing networks of memory and meaning. And Hartman made an observation that is central to what we are exploring. The emotional intensity of an experience predicts more reliably how much it will appear in subsequent dreams than any other factor. The more emotionally charged the experience, and especially the more that emotional charge has not found processing during wakefulness, the more persistently it appears in dream material. The internal logic of the system is not, what you thought about the most will appear in your dreams. It is, what still needs emotional processing will appear in your dreams. And what needs emotional processing, almost by definition, is what was avoided. This explains a pattern that many people recognize but rarely manage to articulate. Periods of high cognitive discipline, weeks in which a person manages, during the day, to keep difficult content outside the attentional field, function with apparent balance, and not let it take up space, often coincide with more disturbed nights, more vivid dreams, or waking with an emotional feeling that has no obvious connection to what the day produced. It is not a contradiction. It is a correlation. What the day contained, the night processes, and the more contained the day, the more work the night has ahead. If this describes something you have experienced, those nights that choose exactly the most difficult content to work through, this channel exists to put a name to precisely that pattern. Subscribe so the next video will already be waiting for you. But there is still another dimension to this pattern that goes beyond the occasional dream with difficult content. What happens when avoidance is systematic? When the same content is avoided night after night? When the sleep system cannot complete the processing in a single night and begins to escalate the urgency of the request for processing in ways that become increasingly difficult to ignore? William Domhoff, from the University of California, Santa Cruz, is one of the most rigorous researchers in the field of dream content. Over decades of collecting and analyzing dreams from thousands of people under controlled conditions, he developed what became known as the continuity hypothesis. The central idea is deceptively simple. Dream content is not random. It reflects, continuously and systematically, the concerns, conflicts, and emotional content that occupy the mind during wakefulness. What occupies the mind during the day tends to appear in the dreams of the night. And what occupies the mind persistently, what remains active week after week, month after month, continues to appear in dreams with the same persistence. But Domhoff documented something more specific that is directly relevant to what we are exploring. Continuity also applies, perhaps especially, to content that is actively avoided. What is avoided during wakefulness does not disappear from the nervous system's agenda. It remains active in the background as a pending task, and the sleep system, operating with access to this agenda, tends to work on what is pending, regardless of whether the person preferred not to think about it while awake. Researcher Antonio Zadra from the University of Montreal reached this same territory through a clinical path. Zadra devoted much of his career to studying nightmares, not as a curiosity, but as a phenomenon with a precise mechanism and a specific function. What he documented is that the frequency and intensity of nightmares in individuals are consistently predicted by the extent to which difficult emotional content is avoided during wakefulness. People who chronically avoid processing difficult emotional content, through distraction, suppression, or simply by not creating space for that content to be felt, show a higher frequency of nightmares than people who have more fluid access to emotional processing during wakefulness. Zadra's interpretation is not that nightmares are symptoms of pathology, it is that they are the nervous system escalating the urgency of the request for processing. If regular dreaming was not enough to complete the processing, Or if the avoided content is intense enough that a single night of dream processing is insufficient, the system increases the intensity. It makes the dream more vivid, more disturbing, harder to ignore, as if it were saying, "This needs attention and you are not paying attention." The nightmare, in this interpretation, is not a failure of sleep. It is sleep functioning with maximum urgency, trying, through the intensity of the experience, to create the opening that wakefulness did not provide. Think about how this pattern manifests in ways that many people will immediately recognize. The person who avoids thinking about a difficult decision for weeks, who distracts themselves, fills their free moments, who simply never opens the file, and then begins having recurring dreams around the same theme. Not necessarily dreams about the decision itself, often dreams with the same emotional texture as the decision. The feeling of being trapped, of having no way out, of something important waiting, without the literal content having any direct connection to what is being avoided. Or the person who went through a significant loss or rupture managed to stay functional during the period of greatest demand and then, weeks later, begins having nightmares with content that seems unrelated to the present but carries the same emotional weight as what was not processed when it happened. Or an even more specific situation, the person who found an effective way not to think about something before going to sleep, filling the final minutes of wakefulness with stimulation, shows, their phone, anything that keeps attention away from the difficult content, and then wakes up in the morning with the feeling that the dream dealt with exactly what they tried to avoid as they fell asleep. In all these cases, the system is being consistent. It is working on what is pending, not because it is cruel, not because it disregards the person's preference, not because there is no way around it, but because emotional processing that did not happen during wakefulness has to happen at some point. And sleep is the environment the system created to do exactly that work. The attempt to avoid does not cancel the task. It simply transfers it, with interest, to the night. There is a way of understanding dreams that process exactly what was avoided that completely changes what is possible to do with them. The dream is not a failure. It is a report. It is saying something very specific about the state of the nervous system in relation to the content that appeared. This is still here. It is still pending. The system is trying to work on this and needs more than the nights alone can provide. Not as a symbolic message that needs interpretation, as direct data about what has not yet received enough processing during wakefulness. And once the dream is seen as data rather than a problem, the question changes. Not, how do I stop myself from dreaming about this? But what can I create during wakefulness so the nighttime system doesn't have to work so hard on its own? Not necessarily solving the content, but creating contact with it, acknowledging it, allowing it to be present for a period of time, even if brief, even if uncomfortable, without the immediate urgency to eliminate it or find a solution. This kind of contact during wakefulness does not guarantee peaceful dreams, but it reduces the processing pressure that avoidance accumulates. And over time, it creates the conditions for the sleep system to complete the work it has begun, instead of restarting it every night from the same starting point. The dream that processes what was avoided is not the enemy of rest. It is the inevitable cost of a system that was built not to leave important emotional content unprocessed. And the most effective way to work with this system is not to try to control what appears at night, but to offer what needs processing some space during the day. The dream rebound effect, documented by Daniel Wegner and colleagues in 2004, experimentally showed that deliberately suppressing a thought before falling asleep increases, rather than decreases, the likelihood of that content appearing in dreams. The mechanism is the ironic monitoring generated by the attempt at suppression, which keeps the suppressed content in a higher state of cognitive accessibility, making it a priority for the sleep processing system as conscious control dissolves with sleep. The threat simulation theory, proposed by Antti Revonsuo at the University of Turku, argues that the primary biological function of dreams is the simulation of threatening events, allowing the nervous system to rehearse responses to risky situations in a safe environment. From this perspective, content avoided during wakefulness is precisely the kind of content the sleep system was built to prioritize: emotionally charged, related to physical or social survival, and still unprocessed. The research of Ernest Hartman at Tufts University on dreaming as a context for emotional connection documented that the emotional intensity of an experience is the primary predictor of its appearance in subsequent dream material, and that dreams function as a space of integration in which new emotionally significant experiences are connected to existing networks of memory and meaning. The more emotionally charged an experience is and the less it is processed during wakefulness, the more persistently it appears in dreams. The continuity hypothesis, developed by William Domhoff at the University of California, Santa Cruz, through decades of systematic analysis of dream content, proposes that dreams continuously and systematically reflect the concerns and emotional content that occupy the mind during wakefulness, including, with particular consistency, content that is actively avoided. Daytime avoidance does not cancel the presence of the content on the nervous system's agenda. It keeps it as a pending task that the nighttime system tends to prioritize. The research of Antonio Zadra at the University of Montreal on nightmares and emotional avoidance documented that the frequency and intensity of nightmares are consistently predicted by the extent to which difficult emotional content is avoided during wakefulness. From this perspective, the nightmare is the sleep system escalating the urgency of the request for processing, increasing the intensity of the dream experience until the content can no longer be ignored. If any part of this video describes something you have experienced, that dream that appeared with exactly the content you spent the day trying not to think about, leave it in the comments. One word, what stayed with you? Because recognizing the dream as a report, as the system saying, "This is still here, it still needs attention," completely changes what is possible to do with it. But there is a pattern that directly connects what we explored in this video to something that happens during wakefulness, not during sleep. The same ironic logic that makes a suppressed thought appear more strongly in dreams when it is suppressed before sleep operates, in an analogous way, in another very ordinary situation, when you try to relax. Not when you relax naturally, when the environment is conducive and the system simply settles down, but when you actively, deliberately, forcefully try to relax yourself. When you close your eyes and instruct yourself to let go. When you take a deep breath and try to convince the system that everything is okay. When relaxation becomes a task. And then you notice, with a frustration that is, in itself, the opposite of relaxation, that the system has become more activated, not less. That the effort to relax has produced the opposite of the state you intended. It is not a lack of willpower. It is not an exaggeration. It is the nervous system responding to the effort to relax in the only way it can respond to any kind of effort, with activation. What happens inside the brain when you try to force yourself to relax, and why genuine relaxation never comes through effort, is what the next video will explore with all the precision this paradox deserves.